If you have ever heard that gentle gargle in the morning, you have already met one of Italy's greatest inventions. This video has no pictures to watch, only a voice and a story. In the dark, details behave differently. Objects become symbols, habits become choices, and history feels less distant. Tonight, we don't scroll, we don't rush, we listen. Because in the darkroom, light is not something you turn on, it's something you develop, one frame at a time, one sound at a time. Welcome to Darkroom Diaries. This sound doesn't belong to music. It lasts few seconds. It rises, it trembles, then it breaks. If you grew up in Italy or anywhere an Italian kitchen once existed, you know it. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it means something. Before the first word of the day, before the first decision, before the first regret, there is that sound, the gargle. And inside that small, metallic breath is a story about ambition, ego, invention, war, ideology, and scale. Because this is not the story of a coffee maker, it's the story of speed. In the early 20th century, the Italian futurists declared that their movement was the caffeine of Europe. They were intoxicated by velocity, by electricity, by engines, by shock. They despised slowness. They mocked the calm ritual of tea. They wanted the world to move like a motor. Not infused, but pressed. Espresso, a word that literally means squeezed out, pressed out, forced through at speed. For them, espresso was not a drink, it was a manifesto. Modern life, they believed, should not steep, it should explode. But in 1933, this explosion was a privilege. To drink an espresso, you had to go to a bar, stand before a massive chrome machine, wait while a trained barista operated it at 9 bars of pressure. Coffee was a machinery. Coffee was performance. Coffee was public theater. And theater has a gatekeeper. You paid, you waited, you consumed. Speed was not democratic. Then a quiet man from northern Italy did something radical. He didn't write a manifesto. He didn't design a car. He didn't build a factory for the elite. He built a small aluminium object that could sit on a stove. Alfonso Bialetti didn't just create a kitchen tool. He democratized acceleration. He took the social power of café and compressed it into 8 geometric faces. He handed the bar experience to the people. And the material he chose was not innocent. Aluminium. In Mussolini's Italy, aluminium had been declared the national metal. Steel was scarce, but Italy had bauxite. Aluminium became ideology. Light, modern, self-sufficient. A symbol of industrial independence. Alfonso took that political metal and gave it intimacy. He created what you could call the romance of caffeine and aluminium, a synthesis of elegance, simplicity, and modern need for stimulation. Not a monument, a ritual. Not chrome and spectacle, a flame, a stove, a kitchen. He didn't just shrink a machine, he changed who controlled it. And this is where the story becomes more complicated, because the object that made espresso private would later become global. The object that symbolized autonomy would almost collapse under expansion. The sound that once meant home would echo through boardrooms, debt agreements, hedge funds. But that comes later. For now, stay with the sound, the metallic rise, the soft eruption, the brief turbulence in a quiet kitchen. Because inside it, it's a father who believed in perfection, a son who believed in conquest, and a small mustache man who would sell both dreams to the nation. This is not a story about coffee, it's a story about who controls speed and what happens when acceleration moves from the bar into your home. Welcome to the dark room. Listen carefully, the machine is about to breathe. Alfonso is born in 1888 in a small town in northern Italy. His family is not rich. He learns early that life is work. His father is a traveling salesman, selling branding irons, the tool used to mark wood and leather. It's a job almost gone today, but back then it mattered. It was identity. It was proof. So the Bialettis travel a lot, across regions, across borders, through France, Austria, Germany. A childhood of roads, inns, stations, suitcase. A childhood where home is not a place, it's a pattern. And as a child, Alfonso becomes fascinated by one figure in particular, the craftsman. The person who can create something useful from nothing, something that improves daily life and still manages to be beautiful. You can feel it already. Alfonso isn't chasing wealth, he's chasing meaning. He doesn't want to live under anyone's shadow, so he lives. He emigrates to France. He ends up in Paris. Paris in 1910, for a young Italian worker, feels like another universe. Art in the streets, poetry in the air, a kind of optimism that makes you believe the future can be designed. And Alfonso absorbs it like oxygen. He works in a foundry and learns a new industrial technique, shell molding, a way to cast metal efficiently, producing many identical pieces from a single mold. This matters because he learns something profound. You can make beauty repeatable. That is a dangerous revelation, because once you realize beauty can be repeated, you start looking at the world as a series of shapes waiting to be perfected. He builds a life there. He meets a woman. He marries. They have a child. Then Europe darkens. War approaches. Not with one dramatic moment, but with a slow tightening. Conversation change tone. Streets changing rhythm. Futures becoming uncertain. Slowly, the pull of home becomes impossible to ignore. So Alfonso returns to Italy. He settles in Turin. He finds work at a young but promising company, Fiat. It should be a fresh start, but Turin is not Paris. The air is colder, the mood is heavier. And then tragedy arrives like a door closing. Only months after the move, both his wife and his child fall ill with pneumonia, often fatal at the time. They die. Alfonso loses everything: family, stability, and even his job, because grief doesn't fit into factory schedules. He wanders with a broken heart and a stolen future. And this is where the psychology begins to harden. Some people collapse inward, others become obsessed with structure. When the world takes that what you love without explanation, you start trying to build things that do have explanations. His only comfort is poetry, French and Italian poets who can give words to pain when pain is too big for speech. And slowly, step by step, he begins to move again, not because the pain disappears, but because the body learns to keep walking anyway. In Paris, he learned shell molding. Now that skill becomes his second chance. With a loan from his father, Alfonso opened a small foundry in Crusinallo, near Romagna, by Lake Horta, and against all odds, things start working. He manufactures automotive parts, engine pistons, precision components, solid, practical objects, not romantic, not poetic, but necessary. And yet, even in necessities, Alfonso searches for elegance. Then comes the real turning point, a material. A material that begins to reshape the market, aluminium. Light, modern, industrial, but with a certain grace. Alfonso falls in love with it, not just because it's useful, but because it feels like the future you can hold in your hands. And his choice of material is not only technical, it is political. In the 1920s and 30s, under the fascist regime, and later during international sanctions, Italy lacked steel but produced aluminium. The government promoted it as the national metal, a symbol of autarky and self-sufficiency. So aluminium becomes ideology, not just metal, myth. And Alfonso, whether he wants it or not, is working inside that climate. He spends the night in the workshop, drawing, testing, failing, trying again. And in this new phase of life, a young woman notices him. Her name is Ada. She is direct, concrete, grounded. The kind of person who doesn't romanticize struggle. She counts it, measures it, survives it. She seems this man living between poetry and metallic noise, and she follows him into the foundry, pretending she is just helping. But really, she is choosing him, and maybe choosing what he represents, a stubborn refusal to disappear. They marry in 1921. Alfonso creates, Ada keeps the accounts and keeps the family alive. They have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. The son is restless. His name is Renato. Remember him, because Renato is not a poet. He is motion. Alfonso wants to create something for his community, something that matters. One day, an opportunity knocks. A company proposes building a motorcycle for the people. Alfonso is enchanted. Imagine it, his name engraved on a machine moving through the world. Not a hidden part inside an engine, something visible, something with presence. He accepts, maybe with too much enthusiasm, because Alfonso is the kind of man who, once he believes in an idea, can't half believe it. To build it, he risks everything. He even personally guarantees the financing. And then, disaster. The client collapses financially, and when it falls, it drags Alfonso down with it. Again. The foundry can't absorb the shock. The Bialetti family is left without nothing. Alfonso sinks into apathy. Not dramatic despair, not tears in the street, a quieter thing. A man who stops moving before movement feels pointless. And there's only one small luxury he still keeps: coffee at the bar. That warm corner of the day, that small proof that life is still allowed to taste good. Ada watches the numbers, and she says, very calmly, until you fix the business, you can't forget coffee at the bar. It's not cruel, it's survival. But for Alfonso, it feels like losing even the last warm corner of his day. He retreats to the garden, silent and distant. And this matters psychologically, because Alfonso doesn't just lose money, he loses dignity. And when a man loses dignity, he either breaks or he invents. One morning, the sun is high. Ada is outside doing laundry using an early washing device, something like a primitive washing machine. Water boils in a large metal container. Steam pushes the water up a central tube, and it falls back down over the clothes. Alfonso watches, and then it hits him. That movement, steam pressure lifting water upward, could be used for coffee. Not a motorcycle, something simpler, something for everyone, a coffee maker. Now, a coffee maker doesn't sound revolutionary, but here's the thing. Coffee at the time is still mostly a public ritual. The bar, the counter, the social moment. Huge machines, 9 bars of pressure, steam and noise and theater. At home, people use the Napolitan coffee pot, slower, more complicated, not as immediate. A ritual, yes, but a different kind. One of that takes time you may not have. Alfonso wants something else, something that feels like espresso, but inside your kitchen. And when Alfonso wants something, he doesn't wish for it. He obsesses. The first prototypes are rough, imperfect welds, strange proportion, pieces that don't seal well, machines that look like they are apologizing for existing. But Alfonso is patient. He draws lines, calculates angles, adjusts measurements like a man trying to tune an instrument. Because this is what he does emotionally. He turns uncertainty into geometry. He turns grief into design. It needs to be stable but elegant, practical but beautiful. And then the shapes appear. An octagon. 8 faces catching light. Not only functional, recognizable. This isn't just style. The 8 faces make the pot easier to grip when screwing it open. The geometry allows the aluminium to cool faster and release more easily from the casting molds. Beauty that obeys physics, and physics that looks like beauty. He solves the handles with black bakelite so it won't burn your fingers. He designed the funnel filter to hold coffee grounds and still allow water to pass. He calibrates pressure. Too much and it explodes. Too little and nothing rises. And one evening, after one last adjustment, he builds the final prototype. He pours water up to the safety valve, adds coffee into the filter, screws it closed, places it on the flame. Minutes pass slowly. Water heats, pressure rises, and then that sound, the gargle. Coffee begins to climb and fill the room with aroma. Alfonso pours a cup and offers it to Ada. She looks skeptical. She tastes, and she says 2 simple words. It's coffee. For Alfonso, those 2 words are like a door opening. He has created one of the simplest, smartest household inventions in history, because he wasn't allowed to drink coffee at the bar. 8 faces of aluminium, about to enter millions of homes. The mocha works, but success doesn't arrive immediately. Alfonso sells them personally at fairs and markets. He produces around 1,000 per year, hand-checked, almost hand-loved. For him, it's not a product, it's an artwork that happens to make coffee. And this is Alfonso's psychology in its purest form. He cannot separate function from soul. He believes objects have dignity. He believes that details matter because the details are what people touch. But inside the house, a storm is growing. Because Renato, the son, has a completely different energy. Alfonso wants perfection. Renato wants scale. Alfonso is a craftsman. Renato is a salesman. And the tragedy is both are right. Perfection without scale dies quietly. Scale without care becomes hollow. They fight, violently sometimes. Two people too similar to surrender, too different to live peacefully. And one day Renato storms out. He doesn't come back, not because he hates his father, but because he can't breathe inside his father's rhythm. Renato grows up with action in his blood. Where Alfonso thinks in lines and angles, Renato thinks in doors and exits. In the 1940s, during World War II, Renato is drafted, and his life becomes a sequence of risk and improvisation. He is captured, sent to a labor camp, and this is where Renato's mind reveals itself. He learns the economy of survival. If you understand what people want, you can move through closed doors. He barters, he negotiates, he builds relationships with guards and prisoners. He gains small freedoms. He trades cigarettes for bread, bread for clothes for sugar, sugar for favors. And he does something else, something psychological. He refuses to feel powerless. He even bluffs his way into better treatment by pretending to be the son of a wealthy industrialist, convincing local merchants to trade with him. Inside a cage, without realizing it, he becomes an entrepreneur. Some people learn humility in war. Renato learns leverage. And when the war ends, he returns home with one obsession: take the mocha and put it in every Italian house. Not because he wants coffee, because he wants conquest. Not thanks, not flags, but something more intimate. A presence in every kitchen, a symbol that says, we want something. Renato takes control. He drives from shop to shop, selling the mocha like its destiny. Numbers rise: 12,000, 36,000, 100,000. The curve begins to tilt upward, and Renato loves the tilt. But he knows production isn't enough. To win the market, you need a name, a symbol, a memory. So the product becomes Moka Express, fast espresso at home. And then comes advertising. And then comes the truly genius move, television. Carosello. But Carosello needs a character, something people will remember with their eyes and hearts. Renato meets illustrator Paul Campani. Campani looks at him, posture, confidence, thick dark mustache, and smiles. Because the mascot Renato wants is already standing in front of him. Thus is born l'omino coi baffi, the little man with the mustache. He appears on posters in commercials and eventually engraved on the mocha itself. And this is Renato's psychology. He doesn't just sell objects, he sells belongings. He understands that people don't buy metal, they buy a feeling. The mocha stops being just a coffee pot. It becomes identity. It becomes the real one. And from that moment on, the gargle belongs to Italy. The quiet twist. Here's the soft tragedy. The mocha becomes a design icon. It enters museums. It enters almost every Italian home. But the world shifts. New competitors, new habits, new machines, captures, convenience, and Bialetti grows, expands, acquires, sometimes with debt. Then come global crisis, then a pandemic, and slowly the company that once felt like family becomes a financial structure. Today Bialetti has gone through its darkest crisis. restructuring through bankruptcy, hedge funds, and investors far from Romania. The product still exists, but something about the original soul feels thinner. And maybe that's the rule. The more universal an object becomes, the more it risks losing the intimacy that made it sacred. Alfonso, the father, the poet of metal, dies in 1970. Renato, the salesman, the volcano, dies in 2016 after a lifetime chasing freedom. They were opposites. One dreamed of artistic perfection, the other dreamed of conquering the world. One wanted beauty, the other wanted scale, but both were stubborn in that romantic Italian way. And the most incredible part, it all began with a small domestic scene. A woman doing laundry, steam pushing water upward, a man watching and imagining coffee. So when you hear that sound, that gentle, reassuring gargle, maybe you're not just hearing a coffee maker. Maybe you're hearing an echo of two dreamers. And tonight, or tomorrow morning, when the kitchen is quiet, listen for that sound, because for a lot of us, that little gargle isn't just coffee, it's home. So tomorrow morning, when the room is still dim, when the light hasn't fully developed yet, listen. In the dark room, we don't look for brightness, we wait for details to emerge. And sometimes what emerges is not an image, it's a sound, a small metallic breath rising from the stove, the sound of pressure becoming presence, the sound of history repeating itself softly, the sound of home. This was never just about coffee, it was about who controls the flame and who stands close enough to hear the breathe. Welcome back to the dark room, where even a gargoyle can tell a century-long story.